We've just finished the questioning of Mark Metcalf at the undercover policing inquiry. Mark Metcalf was an activist with Colin Roach Centre and numerous other groups that was targeted by the undercover police officer Mark Jenner. I'm joined by Kate Wilson of Police Spies Out of Lives. What did you make of what we've heard from Mark Metcalf?
I mean, we heard a lot about football.
We did hear a lot about football.
And as a born and bred Newcastle fan myself, obviously.
Oh, okay, I didn't know. Yes, right. Yeah, okay.
And an anarchist. So.
Yes, yeah.
And I mean, he said the only thing worse than being called an anarchist was being called a Newcastle fan. So
right, yeah.
So yeah, but
doubly
anyway,
bad.
We heard a lot about football. We also heard about anti-fascism, his views on anti-fascism. I get a sense that Mark Metcalf and I would have disagreed politically on a lot of things over the years.
Yeah, I think so.
But,
similar, yeah.
But he came across as somebody with a lot of moral integrity who'd done a lot of good stuff. And I guess kind of continuing in the vein of a lot of the stuff we've heard at this inquiry of how it has really made me think differently about a lot of the groups that I wouldn't have given the time of day back in the day. Because of ideological differences. I think it's an important thing to say because I think that people, like young people, are still embroiled in these ideological differences. And I think looking back on 20 years and realizing we had bigger enemies is quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something which I think comes home to me quite a lot. I mean, there was a time I used to be quite sectarian about what I used to always refer to as last century's left. And, you know, I think a lot of in retrospect, a lot of that was largely pointless. I don't think I was particularly wrong necessarily. It's just that it's what's the purpose of it?
Exactly. And like being able to look now and see the value of, you know, a lot of really, I mean, he obviously did a lot of really important work and he touched on so many things in like over the day, talking about, you know, the Turkish and Kurdish struggles and talking about, he got very emotional when he talked about the death of Joy Gardner. He obviously knew Joy Gardner before she died. And domestic violence. Yeah, there were a lot of issues that they worked on, and the Colin Roach Centre was obviously a really important space.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at what we've heard since the last break, we had a look at some of the other activities of Mark Jenner in terms of infiltrating trade union activities, and we knew already that he was the secretary of the Brian Higgins defence campaign, but also that he was a member of UCAT. Mark Metcalf was quite dismissive about Mark Jenner's involvement in trade union activity, though he did attend some pickets and some other things. He said he didn't really have the knowledge in order to engage properly.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a common theme when you hit there's a kind of superficiality to a lot of this involvement where maybe he would talk more about his trade union activity to people who weren't involved in trade union activity because it gave him credibility. But actually, if you were involved in trade union activity, you see that it's quite superficial the way that the spy cops get involved. I mean, there was also a quite impassioned speech from Mark Metcalf from the witness box about how he's really not the person to be asked about the blacklisting.
There was quite a lot of questions about blacklisting, which I mean, I kind of felt that we're quite a high level of was there any information passed from the undercover police to the Consulting Association? And he's like, well, I mean,
yeah, he's like, I'm just not the person to talk about this. I mean, it wasn't even clear to me the extent to which Metcalf himself was blacklisted. But I mean, and we saw this yesterday as well. There were questions at the end about Steve Headley's own blacklist, and we've heard from other witnesses who were on the blacklist. I think Dan Gilman, who have all said like the man to ask about this is Dave Smith. He's been doing this for 20 years, and he really knows the details. And yesterday at the end, I noticed Mitting was kind of digging down into the details and the dates of the blacklisted files, maybe because he has been criticised and he is facing a judicial review over the decision not to call Dave Smith and the seeming disinterest of the inquiry in blacklisting. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, the thing which Mark Metcalf was able to talk at length about in terms of blacklisting was the blacklisting of Brian Higgins, who's now sadly dead, who was a co-participant in the inquiry before his death. By the blacklisting of Steve Headley and the campaign around that. I mean, he went on a lengthy explanation of the fallout we had with Steve Headley. I mean, we learned a lot of history today.
Yes.
A lot of things that maybe didn't relate to the deployment of Mark Jenner, but were, I mean, you know, it's part of history. He was asked about the eventual closure of the Colin Roach Centre, about the falling apart of the resistance group as an organisation, and was asked, you know, what influence did Mark Jenner have on that? He was like, his body language was very dismissive, but he did say that, you know, Mark Jenner was of course influential within that Mark Jenner did agitate within the groups about certain issues. That we see the reports. They talked about the divisions that existed, the clash of personalities. Mark Metcalf said, yeah, there was big personalities within the group, but he never had any problem with falling out with people, with having political disagreements with people. He talked about the numerous articles back and forth that he had with Steve Headley about, you know, where he felt he'd sold out on a particular dispute, but he still managed to be in an organisation with him. The fact the organisation fell apart. I mean, he said, well, will it still exist now if it wasn't for Mark Jenner, or he thinks not? And I said, well, I personally think that there's another question beyond that of like, would it have lasted more years without Jenner? And it doesn't matter whether it lasted till now. And we see so many organizations that the undercover cops infiltrated that ended up falling apart. I mean, Mark Jenner joined the Colin Roach Centre in 95. In 98, it fell apart. It was a little over 3 years.
I mean, I think we lived through the collapse of these organizations, and I've had some similar experiences myself. And for years, we've told ourselves a narrative about why those organizations collapsed. And I think the role that undercover officers might have played in that is not direct and it's not obvious. And that this is something that, when all the disclosure comes out from the inquiry, I think it's one of the things that it would be interesting to look into in more detail is, well, where do we see them, you know, pushing on these pivot points around, and also how, you know, not just the internal disputes within the organizations, but also how the intelligence-driven, intelligence-led overt repression and over policing of organizations leads to people burning out, people being traumatized, people not wanting to come back, and organizations falling apart. I think it's not as clear as or, you know, that some of the kind of agent provocateurism and taking organizations towards kind of more radical, more criminal directions, because that is one of the things that eventually leads to organizations, you know, crashing and burning.
Absolutely. I mean, I think as well that there's an element of which these organizations, they're not institutions with lots of resources, and that they require being rebuilt on a very regular basis. You know, it's not just that like kind of, people fall apart, it kind of comes to an end. You need to constantly be recruiting in. You need new people coming in all the time. If that's distracted from, if that's undermined by the influence of an undercover police officer, then eventually the shelf life comes up for any sort of organization. And so it only takes nudges, really, because these are very fragile like kind of organizations. They don't have like the strength of or funding that, you know, other things might have.
There were some other questions relating to the spy cops, and we heard about something that we heard during Alison's evidence the other day about when Mark Jenner, Mark Cassidy moved in with her, and we saw his excuses in the documents that he was giving in his own statement, but also in documents at the time, that she was his landlady, that you know, they had a communal house with a communal kitchen, all of this stuff. When in reality what he was doing was moving in with his girlfriend. One of the excuses that he gave was that Mark Metcalf had told him to move in with Alison because he didn't have a landline in the grotty place where he was living. And Mark dismissed it. Well, he didn't dismiss it. He said, you know, I've really thought about this. Like, what, you know, did I do that? Was it my fault? He said, yeah, he didn't have a landline. He was a pain in the ass to get hold of. And he explained that he sometimes had to call a guy who lived across the road and get him to go and knock on the door to get his attention. But that, and I mean, I had to laugh at some of the descriptions of the unreconstructed.
Very unreconstructed.
But yes, he did say that he would never have suggested that a man moved in with a lass in that way. And I mean, it boggles my mind, because if the police needed Mark Jenner to have a landline, they're the sodding Metropolitan Police. Just install a landline.
It's
just
such a
nonsense. If you need a landline for your deployment, you install a landline. You don't move in with some random woman.
No, I mean, a nonsense. I mean, he also rejected the claim of Mark Jenner that Alison was not active within the Colin Roach Centre.
Absolutely.
And there was a couple of other bits and pieces around some of the stuff that Jenner had claimed that he rejected. I'm forgetting what that was now. Sorry.
I mean, he rejected a lot of what Jenner said, and he described a lot of his reporting as fictional.
Yes, he said it was largely fiction. He was asked the impact it had upon him. He said that it hadn't affected his politics in life generally, but it was obviously very wrong. That he was very angry about the fact that he didn't identify the fact that Mark Jenner was an undercover officer at the time. He talked about how the horrendous effect that it had on Alison, and the effect that so many of the undercover officers had both on the women and the families of the children whose identity they stole, and so many other things. I mean, it's been quite a long day. Mark Metcalf gave some very fulsome answers to a lot of the questions.
He spoke very fast.
Very fast. I would say my reporting on it was probably suffered a bit, partially because the speed of what was being said, but also the breadth of the topics that were being covered. I think I pretty much reported on everything that related to Mark Jenner that was mentioned, but I may have missed out quite a lot of other things. I mean, if you do want to catch up, though there were quite a few breaches, the majority of the broadcast is available to watch. There'll be a transcript which comes out. Who knows?
And the inquiry has said that they are splicing back in the bits from the breaches that get lost in the live broadcast, but that in theory they should be filling those gaps back in, so the broadcast only goes down for the few seconds where the actual breach was made.
I mean, that's good, because that hasn't always been the case.
That's something that I think we've won, and we need to keep pushing on. So if you notice that any of these broadcasts are missing big chunks, we lose at least 13 minutes every time there's a breach on the live broadcast, but that should now be being cut back in. And I would remind people that when this inquiry started, they weren't broadcasting anything. They weren't even keeping the video of the remote interviews with the undercover police officers. There's just a transcript. We've had to push every step of the way to get this stuff out. We used to have a YouTube rolling transcript. I remember we got actors to read it aloud in order to shame the inquiry into providing something a bit better. So we have made progress over the years.
All right, we'll be back again tomorrow. Dr. Graham Smith will be questioned. He was another member of the Colin Roach Centre who was targeted by Mark Jenner. Then we're back again after that on Monday with Mark Jenner himself, who will be giving 4 days of evidence before the inquiry gets to the end of phase 1 and takes a break until February.
And I'm off back on tour.
Oh yes, where are you going next?
I'll be at the Cowley Club in Brighton on Friday evening. We're then going to Norwich, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not going to say where it is, but I will tweet it after we've done this. But I'm with the Caracol Bookshop, but I can't remember the venue, in Norwich.
Nice.
And then on Tuesday, we will be in Nottingham at the Sumac Centre. If anyone is around that area, we will have Mark Jenner's live evidence from that day broadcast. We're going to be projecting it onto a wall, and we're going to be filling the broadcast suspended and breaks with debate and discussion, and maybe some kind of pub quiz, Spike Ops bingo. We haven't really decided yet, but I think it's going to be fun. Nice.
The Sumac Centre has been doing a lot of these broadcasts. Doing sort of like the Spike Ops TV, following the inquiry, showing the broadcasts as they happen, showing these videos when they happen. So if you're in the Nottingham area, really worth supporting, really worth going on.
And if anyone would like to do something during the next round of hearings along those lines, then get in touch, because I think that it's kind of wearing being in London. I'm up for heading off around the country and doing something a bit more.
Maybe you too could have a Kate Wilson in your area. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the coverage of the inquiry, we always seek to try and improve it at each set. So when we come back in February, we'd like to improve the kind of the coverage that we're doing. So if you want to be part of that, if you're able to come down to the hearings and take part in this process or any other thing that you think might be a good idea, please get in touch. Please suggest things.
Oh, and we've started, I don't know if anyone's noticed, we've started doing video clips of the evidence. So if anyone is following the evidence and you see examples of particularly good bits that are, iconic, clippable, then message us, let us know, and we will get those turned into video clips.
Yes, absolutely, and
share them when you see them on social media.
Yeah, please share them, and please, you don't have to quote us or anything. Just take the video clips and share them as you please. I mean, that goes for these videos as well. Or anything that we produce. Please copy our homework. All right, cheers. Now we'll see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. for Dr. Graham Smith. Bye for now.
Bye for now.